What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Dude Hine Show. Today is September 1st, 2021, and this is a Bengals-themed episode. And joining me today is Frank Laplaca of the Cincy Bengals Podcast. How you doing today, Frank?
All right, Jordan. Thanks for having me on.
Really glad you're able to make it and stuff. I really like when you're able to, join the shows and stuff because there's so much stuff we can talk about. Our last episode, we kind of mentioned it was one of our better ones we were able to do. And actually, the one before, we mentioned there were so many interesting camp battles at different positions. And I mean, that was really a understatement. There's just so many interesting positions, people trying to make the team. There was roster cuts and different things like that. There is so much to get into in today's episode. I mean, we can talk about Billy Price being traded to the Giants. I don't think many people expected that to happen. The releases, the updated practice squad, because some of the people that were released are now back on the practice squad. But to me, I kind of want to start it off with something interesting. I know lots of people, especially on Bengals Facebook, were really vocal about, and that was the Bengals and Zach Taylor's option to, instead of going for it on fourth down, to try to give Evan McPherson another chance to make another field goal because he was 5-5 of the preseason on field goals. Or also giving Austin Seibert one last chance to possibly make the roster. Instead of going for a field goal, we actually went for it on fourth down. We were unsuccessful, and we ended up losing that game. If we would have kicked the field goal and made it, it would have been we would have tied it up with about 30 seconds or so to go. So what are your kind of thoughts on that decision by Zach Taylor?
Well, just like preseason games go, really no one cares about the wins and the losses. I mean, I like to see the Bengals win every game possible. But the same thing goes with a tie. Like a tie in preseason, it's almost like an insult in a way. I don't know. That's how I was thinking. But the real rationale behind the decision by Coach Taylor, I thought was this. It was like, we don't want to tie. We're just going to try to go for the win here. Even though I didn't like that they only had, it was like a one option play. It was like either Scotty Washington caught it or nothing else was going to happen on that. I wish they would have had another guy coming underneath or maybe a couple route options on that. So that was a weird play call in itself, but I think the reason why they didn't kick the field goal is because McPherson kicked that 57-yarder, and he proved that he can kick over 50. He's done 2 of them in the preseason, and it was like, you know what? Let's go out on a high note with McPherson. Let's not have him go for the tying field goal and potentially miss it, and now his last kick of preseason was a miss from 50, as opposed to it was a make from 57 that we wanted to have a parade for. So I think it was worth going out on that note. And by the same token, Seibert wasn't going to make the team. It was obvious. And I mean, maybe they could have had him kick it and he would have had a little more trade value. I don't know. But I don't know if there was that much to gain from it. So I think it was more a case of protecting McPherson's confidence and saying, we don't want to have a tie in preseason. That's my thought on it. So although at the time I was like, oh man, I'm happy that they chose to go that route. I think it's better for McPherson, and you had that mentality. We're at home, we're going for the win. So those are my thoughts on it.
And I really agree with that because you look at McPherson, like I said, he was 5-5 of preseason. You don't want him to end the preseason on a bad note if he would to miss. I'm not saying he would, but if there was a situation he missed it or something like that, that's a confidence killer heading into the regular season. And with, Seibert, he wasn't going to make the team anyway. And, preseason, I mean, it doesn't really matter at wins or losses. But I always play, to win the game. And that's pretty much the motto in the NFL and football in general. I know lots of people were upset that, we went for it. I was actually really, really glad we did. I will be the first person to admit I'm one of the very few people who are vocally outspoken. They are not really high on Zach Taylor. I'm not really high on Taylor like other people are. And that was something last year. Specifically, you go back to the Eagles game. We ended up tying that game. And to me, I thought there were different moments throughout that game that we possibly could have maybe, done better and maybe went for it on fourth down more, something like that. Instead, we ended up tying. And, people were content with tying against Philadelphia, which in my opinion, I really felt like we had potential to win. We just did not execute much, and the play calls were not there. As opposed to, just this past week, we're trying to win, and some people are complaining. I 100%, if this was a regular season, I know this is unpopular. I would still probably go for it on fourth down. I would want to win no matter what. Yet again, I am one of those crazy people on Madden who will go for it on like my own 12-yard line on 4th and 8 or something like that. But to me, I really, really like the decision by Taylor. I know some people might not like it, but I think it's really best for the team, especially looking at if McPherson would have missed it, that could really hurt us, possibly going into the regular season.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, of course, McPherson's not going to get injured kicking a 50-yarder, but yeah, you never know. We protected against that too. And you do bring up some good points about that Eagles game from last year, although, it's kind of lost in my memory. I don't remember all the specifics of it, but that was a game that you're right. Like, come on, let's not play for the tie. Let's get a little more aggressive here. So, Jordan, once again, as always, I'm agreeing with your philosophies there.
And that's something when you're on my show and stuff, I feel like we really have similar opinions on different stuff. And it's like there's times where you want to maybe do something different for the team. Maybe they go for it on fourth down, but at the same time, you always want what's best for the team, and that's ultimately ending up winning the game. I mean, this topic, the next topic here. I mean, this is very, very interesting. Jamar Chase's struggles. I don't think anybody really expected this to be this bad, in my opinion. And, I defended Taylor just in our, last topic. That's one of the first times I've defended Zach Taylor. And now I'm going to go back to the usual and blaming him on stuff. But to me, you look at Jamar Chase against the Washington football team, 3 targets, 3 drops, no excuses. I don't care how good or bad of a receiver you are. If you're an NFL receiver, you should catch at least one ball that you have 2 hands on. He was unable to complete any of those. And then you go to the game this past week against the Miami Dolphins. He has 1 target, perfectly thrown pass by Joe Burrow, and he just, drops it. And to me, that is really concerning. The fact, this is obviously a mental game at this point for Jamar Chase. He knows it's a mental, thing. He cannot get it out of his head. And something else I think is a major, just not really good in my opinion, by Zach Taylor is taking Jamar Chase out of that game. You have to keep him in that game. Just give him 1 catch to end the preseason on a high note. Because the fact that you're done with the preseason with 4 consecutive targets, and every single one of those 4 targets or drop, that's something as we head into the regular season. I'm not one of those people who overreact or underreact when it comes to, preseason football, because I feel like preseason football is nothing more than overreactions. But the fact that Chase's last 4 targets are all drops is very concerning. I feel like Zach Taylor should have kept him in that game to get some more targets, boost his confidence back up that he desperately needs right now. As we head into week 1, next week against the Minnesota Vikings, that to me is probably the most mad I was in the preseason, throughout the whole entire preseason, with Jamar Chase not playing. You have to give him more targets, and you have to just give him some catches to boost his confidence. Now, I mean, obviously, he knows he's, not able to, he's dropped, the passes in Washington. He has that in his head, and he's dropped it against Miami. Now, as we head into the regular season against the Vikings, his confidence is at an all-time low. He needs that confidence booster to get some catches against Miami this past week. I really thought it would have been best for the team. I know it's, you're taking a chance of Chase getting hurt in the preseason, which isn't good, but you need him to get targets to really help himself heading into the regular season.
You know what? That's an interesting perspective, because I was just thinking like Coach Taylor was thinking. I was thinking, all right, the starters are in for 3 plays, get them all out of there. But now that you bring that up, I reflect on it. You're right. I mean, he's a rookie. He's got young legs. The odds of him getting hurt are pretty slim in that situation. So yeah, you're right. They probably should have stuck him in there for another drive and at least got him a catch, just so he could go into the season on a high note. And by the same token, I guess that was a stubbornness out of Coach Taylor. But on the other side of the coin, I did like the play call. It was like, we're going to have Joe Burrow throw 1 pass, and it's going to be a quick pass, and it's going to be to Jamar Chase from like 7 yards away from him. So, you know what I mean? Like they were trying to do everything they could to give Chase an easy reception and Joe Burrow a pretty risk-free pass. So I do like the play call in that aspect, but you're 100% right. They should have left him in there for a little bit longer. He's not a China doll. It's not like he would have broken. They could have given him one more good reception, and he goes into Minnesota with a whole different level of confidence. So I do agree with you there.
It's really interesting with Chase. Hopefully he gets his groove back together because, I was slightly concerned with the drops in Washington, but now the fact that we're heading into the regular season with 4 straight drops, and to me, that's starting concerning because he knows it's in his head. It's a mental thing at this point, and that's really concerning, and in my opinion. But kind of moving on to our next topic here. Tuesday was the final cuts, and there was some lots of surprises, in my opinion, with the cuts. Can you see the screen all right?
Yes.
I cannot zoom in. I don't know why I have Arthur Spooner from the King of Queens on my right, but cannot get that off there. But as you see to your left, some of the viewers to the left are the players who are still on the active roster. On the right are the players who were cut, kind of going off these more well-known names who were released. Jaquiz Patrick, the running back Trevion Williams, wide receiver Scotty Washington, Trent Taylor, Puka Williams was also released, a running back. Thaddeus Moss, the tight end from LSU, that's a big one. Mason Schreck, Keaton Sutherland, the guard, Michael Jordan, the guard as well. Noah Spence, the edge, Rennell Rand, defensive tackle, Mike Daniels, that was a surprise one to me, defensive tackle as well. Joe Bacci, Winston Rose, Trevion Williams, Austin Seibert, and Drew Chrisman, the punter from Ohio State. There's some other guys as well, but those are kind of some of the more well-known ones that ended up being released. So were any of those kind of cuts? What are your kind of thoughts on some of these cuts, and did any of them kind of surprise you a bit?
Yeah, well, there was a few that surprised me. First, Jaquiz Patrick. I think he showed enough in the preseason to be on the roster, and I thought they were going to keep 4 running backs, and I thought they were going to maybe waive Isaiah Prince. I don't know. I was just, you're doing the numbers, offensive guys. If you're going to keep the extra offensive guy, you got to let one of those guys go. So I thought he was the guy on the bubble, but they obviously wanted to retain him. And when Patrick went to waivers, I was like, someone's picking him up. And no one did. So, we got lucky there and got him back. So that worked out in our favor. And then, you go to Thaddeus Moss. He had a lot of receptions that last game. And I was like, oh, he's on the roster. He's Burrow's guy. He's a pass-catching tight end. Boom, boom, boom. But now when I gave it a second thought after I saw they kept Wilcox, a couple things came into play. One, the whole preseason, I saw them really using their tight ends more for blocking than for receptions. I know Moss got his receptions late, but when the other guys were in there, it was really a lot of blocking that was called on for them. And Moss doesn't appear to be a great blocker, and he also doesn't appear to be a very physical guy. Like, a lot of times when you get your tight end the ball in space, it's hard for one DB to bring him down. And he was getting continuously brought down by one DB. So I'm not holding it against him. And I wanted him to make the squad. For some reason, he's just the guy that you want to pull for, and you think he's going to have a big year for us. But I think they saw more in Wilcox. Like, all right, we're not going to have that many targets for our number 3 tight end. So let's get a guy who's a better blocker and a better special teams guy. And Wilcox probably really helped his case by making that 20-yard reception over the middle where he got really banged for the concussion. I think that play alone might have allowed them to say, you know what, he's got the athleticism and the hands to be a pass catcher. So we can probably throw Moss out there. And the rest of the league doesn't seem that up on Moss because he's been on waivers twice and no one cared about it. So again, we got lucky. We were able to clear him through waivers. If there's an injury to one of the other 3, he's going to come on the active squad. Maybe he's going to do something when he's in the lineup. So I'm sure if he's on the team and in the lineup, Burrow is going to look for him from time to time. So it's not the end for Moss. But I kind of understand why they took Wilcox, even though prior to that, I would have said take Moss. And then let me see any of the others. Yeah, I guess the Mike Daniels, waiving Mike Daniels was a bit of a surprise for me because he was such a team leader. He was good in a rotational role. It still seemed like he had something left in the tank. But I guess when they traded for B.J. Hill, they felt, all right, we have a younger version of Daniels who we're expecting about equal production. He's a little bit cheaper and a lot younger. So, I had my doubts about all 3 of those, but they all kind of made sense in the end. So I don't have too many complaints about who did or didn't make the active roster. But the one that upset me was Trenton Irwin, because he just balled out in the preseason. It wasn't just the catches. He was making tough catches, getting destroyed after the catch, and holding onto the ball. I mean, he dropped the one, but they didn't call it a fumble. And it's the route running. Like it's not just, all right, he had a couple catches against third stringers. You watch a guy like that run routes, that's how T. Higgins is. T. Higgins is a superstar wide receiver, in my opinion. But the route running is exceptional. And I saw the same kind of trait in Trenton Irwin. And it's just the guy that you're rooting for because, going into training camp, you're like, he's never going to make the team. Almost like Darius Hodge. You're thinking, like, who are these guys? They're just practice squatters at best. And then to see Irwin really stand up like that, I did want to see him make the team. He was one of those underdogs. And that's how it goes in the NFL. Like, think about it. He made the 53-man roster. He's probably calling his family, hey, guys, I'm on the team. Boom, boom. A couple hours later, they pick up two guys off the street that I never even heard of. And now Irwin's gone. So it's a ruthless league. And, it's a tough way to make a living. So I would say that he was the one I was kind of most upset about because I was just rooting for the underdog.
And a couple things there, that we were one of the first teams in the waiver wire, and obviously both of us are well-known NFL fans. We keep up with teams, not even just the Bengals, but the NFL in general. And I mean, you admitted it, and I'll even admit it myself. I never even heard of the guys that we ended up picking up off the waiver wire. We had one of the first waiver wire. We are near the top of the waiver wire order, and we completely mess it up and pick up two guys I never even heard of before. That was very, very, I don't know, questionable in my opinion, because realistically, we could have just picked those guys up instead of, putting a waiver claim on them, those people. But you mentioned Trenton Irwin. We also, I believe we waived Trenton Irwin, and we terminated the contract of Mike Thomas, the wide receiver. But I was reading something, I saw something earlier. With the way that is, it's most likely we had to waive them, and then Trey Waynes, and I do not remember the other player, are going to go in the IR. Then we'll be able to get Irwin and Thomas back on the roster, I believe. That's something I was reading earlier. And you mentioned Darius Hodge. To me, that's very interesting. My favorite college team is Marshall, and that's where Darius Hodge, ended up playing at. And when the Bengals signed Hodge, I didn't really think of nothing of it because honestly, he wasn't really that good at Marshall. He was okay, nothing great, nothing horrible. I would say about decent. But the fact that he's pretty much came out of nowhere and has been our best player in general in preseason, without a doubt, in my opinion, he's just been absolutely phenomenal so far. And some of the cuts to me that I was kind of surprised by, I kind of said the whole time I was not sold on Thaddeus Moss like other people. And I did not get the hype. I think he's one of the most overhyped, undrafted free agents. And you mentioned it yourself. He's been, cleared waivers multiple times now. And I believe the last time you were on my show, we talked about it quite a bit, how this tight end position for us is definitely one of the most intriguing, position battles. And that definitely turned out to be the truth when Thaddeus Moss, played better than I expected him to be. And he still did not make the team. That's very interesting considering that after Sunday's game, I believe it was, maybe Monday, Joe Burrow said that Thaddeus Moss is going to be a big part of this team. We were able to put him back on the practice squad, but I was still kind of surprised that we did end up waiving him. Let's see here. Renault Wren, I know some people might think that's kind of surprising. When he came out of the draft class, people had way, way, way too much, praise for him, in my opinion. I always thought, he wasn't going to be as good as people thought he was going to be. I saw some people compare him to Geno Atkins, which is just laughable. He's just really never been able to stay healthy this past couple of seasons. And obviously, Mike Daniels, that one to me really stings a bit. You look at our defense right now, Mike Daniels is the most experienced player in the defense without a doubt. You can make a case in our offense as well. Mike Daniels, that, speech he gave against the Steelers last year, dancing in the locker room and stuff like that. He brought the energy to the defensive line last season. He was one pickup last year who I liked, but the more he was on the team, I really, liked him quite a bit. I was really happy when we ended up re-signing him this past offseason to a one-year deal. So to me, Mike Daniels was kind of a surprise. And despite me thinking that Moss is a little bit overrated, um, to me, he kind of exceeded my expectations in the preseason. I was pretty surprised we ended up waiving him.
Yeah, we're in agreement on all those guys. I think those are the main guys. You have Patrick, Moss, Daniels, Irwin. Those were the big surprises. I would have bet that almost every one of those guys would have been on the active roster. So I was wrong.
And those are some of the players that ended up being cut and everything. We were able to retain some of these guys back on the practice squad. I can't really zoom on this either, but most of the guys we talked about who ended up being cut are back on the team. Joe Bacci, the punter from Ohio State, Trayvon Henderson, Thaddeus Moss, Patrick, Mason Schreck, Noah Spence, Trent Taylor, Puka Williams, Trevion Williams, and Ronell Wren. Any of those kind of stand out to you? And are you surprised that we were able to retain any of those guys?
Well, I honestly like the fact that they kept every running back that was on the roster. Like we keep our top 3 on the top 53, and they were able to retain Patrick, who I think has a future in this league. They were able to retain Trevion Williams, who every time he's in there, aside from that one fumble last year, he produces. He was the leader in SEC yardage. The whole story on him. And then Puka Williams, another one. A very, very undersized, but really explosive speed. So I'm kind of glad that we were able to sneak him back on the practice squad, and no other teams were intrigued at maybe grabbing him. But there's a guy that I'm friends with on Twitter named Trevor David, and he brought up a good point about Drew Chrisman, the punter. I know Chrisman was hurt for the first few weeks, but I think he could have physically played in game 3. And this guy, Trevor David, was like, they're not going to put in Chrisman because they don't want other teams to see film on him, and they want to just kind of sneak him onto the practice squad. And I thought that was a very clever insight, and I think it's true. And I'm kind of glad that we did, because I'm feeling like he's going to be Huber's replacement in another year or two. I mean, Huber's still punting very well. I don't want to see him go anywhere, but it feels like they're kind of grooming his replacement. And, all of a sudden we're going to have, like Chrisman and McPherson, these 2 young guys. We could have that kicking game position settled for a decade if it all works out.
And that's very, very interesting. And somebody asked me that a couple of weeks ago if I thought Kevin Huber's position was in danger, and I told him no. I think Crispin might end up starting next season, because you look at Huber, we ended up re-signing him on a one-year deal, and I think the Bengals purposely did that because knowing what they have in Crispin, they're able to have him the next year. He'll eventually be the starter. Also he's pretty much a local guy playing from Ohio State. I mean, it seems like over half of the Bengal fans are Ohio State fans, so obviously you have that going for him. And I was really surprised we ended up retaining Thaddeus Moss, and it's just kind of strange. And to me, it really goes back to show. I mean, he's mainly the main reason people talk about him so much is because obviously his dad is Randy Moss and stuff. But he played better than I thought he would. I thought he would at least maybe go to a tight end needy team. Somebody else that I did not talk about when we were talking about players who get cut. You already mentioned them, Trevion Williams. To me, I would easily say, in my opinion, the most disrespected running back we have right now on our roster. It just does not make any sense, in my opinion. 18 rushing touchdowns, 1,700 yards, and 6 yards per carry during his last year with A&M. Broke the SEC rushing record, I believe. And something else you also look at it is that, last season, I believe he had 25, 30 carries, something like that, and he averaged 5 yards a carry. He did not play. He did not play an offense his rookie year. He did not have a single rushing attempt his rookie season. He patiently waited his turn, and when he eventually got his chance, he absolutely balled out. Like I said, averaged 5 yards per carry, basically a rookie season in a sense, because that's the first time he's ever played snaps at running back. Was phenomenal. And I know he was cut. We ended up having him on the practice squad. But the Trevion Williams, I'm not going to say hate, because Jaquiz Patrick played good, and some of our other running backs as well. But the lack of praise for Trevion Williams does not make really sense to me. I really think he has, of given the opportunity, I think could be pretty good for us. Like we seen last year, like you mentioned, a fumble. But aside from that, he was great. He was one of the people I was concerned about the most that we were able to retain him. I am really, really glad we did because I feel like, he can go in there and play really, really good like he did last year. If a Mixon goes down or something like that. So I'm glad we were able to retain our main guys. I'm really, really glad we were able to retain Trevion Williams.
Yeah, I hear you on that, and I do agree that he's very underrated and very disrespected. The other side of it is I do think that Chris Evans outplayed him in the preseason, but it was because Trevion didn't play those 2 games because of the hamstring injury. That really set him back. Had he played all 3 games, maybe Evans would be the guy on the practice squad and not Williams, but that's just the way it panned out. And, I think Trevion's an injury away from coming up to the active roster. Like if something happens to Mixon or Pirine, you're probably going to see Patrick come up. If something happens to Evans, you're probably going to see Williams come up. So he may have his opportunity, but yeah, again, like you said, he's kind of like the forgotten running back for us.
And it's really interesting. I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago, and we were kind of debating on it. This is an extremely underrated opinion, but I was talking to somebody who didn't agree with me, but then I was also talking to somebody who did agree with me as well. I would rather have Trevion Williams than Fitzpatrick. I know Patrick's played pretty nice for us in the preseason, and there's times, honestly, I think I'd rather have Trevion Williams as Pirine, maybe not necessarily as a running back too, but just as a backup in general. Pirine, we signed him in a 2-year extension in the offseason, but he's more of the power back. Trevion Williams can do a little bit of everything, and honestly, he has potential we haven't even seen yet because he's only had about 25, 30 carries in his whole career, and this being his 3rd season. I really hope, I obviously I don't hope for an injury or anything like that, but I hope Trevion Williams, maybe a situation comes up and he gets some carries because I really feel like he has potential to break out. And it's one of those situations, you look at the NFL and really just sports in general, all players need are a chance. They're not going to play good. They're not going to, play amazing unless they're given an opportunity to have a chance. And we started last year with Williams, and I really hope he ends up, playing a little bit for us because I feel like he can be really, really good as a running back 3 or running back 4.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, the thing that the coaching staff likes about Pirine, it's not just that he could, carry on 1st and 2nd down for you. He's a decent 3rd down blocker, but I think they like what he brings to special teams because he is a pretty tough guy. I saw him stick his nose in there a lot on kick returns and stuff. So, maybe that was a deciding factor because I don't know if Trevion plays special teams. So I don't know. We're not in the minds of the Bengals front office, but that's my speculation as well.
You do make a great point there because it seems like Taylor and especially Darren Simmons, and he's one of the very well respected coaches in the league. It's one of the better special teams throughout the several years. Darren Simmons has potential to possibly be our head coach, depending how if this season were to go really, really bad. Who knows? But Simmons has done a great job in special teams. He really always gets the best out of the players. For the most part. And speaking of getting the most of our players, to me, when you think of coaches, obviously the first person that comes to mind, in my opinion, is Frank Laplaca. He's done tremendous with his offensive line. I don't think we've given up a sack, in my opinion, so far, which is just absolutely phenomenal. And we've not given up a sack yet. The Bengals offensive line will kill Burrow. All that talk has not went away at all. And with the offensive line, there was the trade several days ago where Billy Price was traded to the New York Giants. And, you were actually fortunate enough, and it was really cool. You were able to have, Price on your show, I believe, last year or so. And, this was kind of a shocking move. I did not really expect us to trade him because, honestly, I thought, Price could have been in contention maybe throughout the season, maybe playing guard or center at times if, Hopkins wasn't 100% to go. But what are your kind of thoughts on this whole situation and Price heading to New York?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked because you brought up 2 things that I wanted to touch on before I hit the Price topic. That's a pretty clever insight too. Darren Simmons potentially coming a head coach for us down the road. I could see it. He has those units playing really well. So, you never know there. But going on to Billy Price, I think what happened was they realized that Trey Hill can play, and because Hopkins is still a question mark. It's tough to come off an ACL that quickly. It appears he's going to be ready for game one. But I was thinking the same thing as you. I was thinking, like, all right, well, at least we have Price in there. He's a veteran. He did well under Frank Pollock. And that's also what you said about Pollock. I mean, when he came in, everyone was like, oh, he's going to totally save the offensive line. And I'm like, well, calm down, guys. He can't play right tackle, But seeing the impact he's had in this preseason has been amazing. So I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, and I think that he is going to make this line a functional line and not what it was last year. But yeah, back to Price. I thought they were going to keep him, have a veteran presence in there. I guess they save a little bit of money. Maybe they really like that defensive tackle. I don't know the full reason behind it. I mean, I was happy that Billy Price came on my show. He was very cool to me. That all that is good. But I'm kind of torn on it. From looking at it from the outside, I'm just thinking, well, Trey Hill, they really believe in Trey Hill. So that's my only real observation on that.
And that's a very interesting thing, because that was my initial reaction. I was surprised, and my immediate reaction was, I mean, they have to be dead set on Trey Hill, because that's somebody that hasn't really been talked about a whole ton in the preseason. And once Price was traded, a couple hours went by, and somebody told me, messaged me, they're so high on Trey Hill. Sent me a little video of him. He absolutely humiliated one of the defensive linemen, I believe, in the I don't know if it was the Redskins game or the Dolphins game, but he absolutely, it was a pancake block. It was perfectly executed by Hill there. And to me, it's just very interesting, because without a doubt, Billy Price's best season was under Frank Pollock. When Frank Pollock was the new offensive line coach, I thought Price had potential to be a starter for us and be pretty solid. Price, he wasn't really vocal about it in the interviews, but you can tell throughout his, Twitter likes and, stuff like that, he was not really, fond of our, last offensive line coach. And they bring back Pollock, who he's familiar with, had his best year with. Then you ended up trading him. But to me, that's really surprising. Obviously with this deal, we end up getting B.J. Hill, the defense tackle from the New York Giants. He is also in the final year of his contract as well, just like Billy Price. We also believe we get a 7th round pick. So to me, if Price wasn't going to start, I guess it's better to get something instead of nothing. But at the same time, I know our offensive line is played good so far in the preseason. But I still think it's kind of risky, giving up somebody who's had experience, especially with our offensive line coach we have, that most people on our offensive line group right now hasn't had. If somebody were to go down in the interior offensive line, all of a sudden it gets pretty decently slim. But like I was saying, I guess it's better to get something out of nothing. But I don't know. I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I don't love it. I don't hate it. Just kind of in between.
Yeah, Jordan, when you think about it on this level, and this thought just hit me as we were talking about it, they picked up B.J. Hill, right? They decided that B.J. Hill was more valuable than Billy Price and Mike Daniels, right? Because he replaced Daniels, and it enabled Price to go to another team and Hill to come. I mean, I just thought about that right now. They must really have a lot of faith in this B.J. Hill guy. I hope that he turns out to be what they gave up to get him.
And also, in a sense, you look at, they are really high on B.J. Hill. Going back to Trey Hill, I mean, the fact, if it wasn't for Trey Hill, Billy Price is still on the team, and you can make a case Mike Daniels is still on the team. So, B.J. Hill, Trey Hill, I mean, the Bengals clearly see something in both those, offensive line and defensive line guys. Very interested to see how both those guys perform this season. Trey Hill probably won't play a whole lot. B.J. Hill, I am interested in, though, because, we had, Renell Rand, but, he is back on our practice squad. Daniels, who knows? Maybe we end up re-signing him if, defense tackle gets slim with an injury, something like that. But, is there any other, topics or anything like that you have in mind, or any thoughts and comments?
Not really. I think we covered everything regarding the two Hills, at least. Yeah, and Frank Pollock and that whole scenario.
Yeah, we kind of talked about, the field goal or go for it in the preseason finale against the Miami Dolphins. Jamar Chase's struggles, and it's starting to be concerning. The updated releases and stuff like that, and also the updated practice squad roster. We were able to retain some of our guys, and also the Billy Price trade. Him heading to the New York Giants, and in return we get defensive tackle B.J. Hill and a 7th round pick. So, Frank, can you kind of tell some of our listeners who can follow you on social media?
Yeah, so the name of my podcast is called The Unofficial Bengals Podcast, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Cincy Bengals Pod.
Yeah, I'll definitely put that in the description below. I mean, you have amazing content, definitely the best Bengals-based podcast out there, in my opinion. You're doing a great job. You're really glad you're able to join the show today, talk some, Bengals. The NFL regular season starts 1 week from tomorrow. Cannot wait for it. Make sure to follow me, the Sports Behind Show, on Instagram and Twitter. You could like this video and subscribe to the channel. I would really, really appreciate it. And I will see you all next time on the Sports Behind Show.